Welcome to Banking on Experience, the one-stop shop for all your financial services tips and tricks, the future of business and the future of the customer. Here is your host from CRM Next.
Hello, I'm Marla Fields, your host for this week's Banking on Experience podcast, brought to you by CRM Next. And I'm so honored to be here today with my friend Grace Vandecruz, talking about a topic that's incredibly relevant and really important, and that is overcoming barriers that exist due to prejudice. Grace Vandecruz is a CPA and financial advisor to the insurance industry. She has over 20 years of working on Wall Street and advising on transactions that total in excess of $5 billion. She is the founder and managing director of Grace Global Capital, LLC. She was actually also selected as one of the 2019 Women to Watch by Business Insurance and awarded the Corporate Woman of the Year by Pace University. So thrilled to have you join us today, Grace. Welcome.
Thank you, Marla. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we talk about your journey, which I know is really inspiring, we have to first talk about what's happening around the country and really around the world right now. In response to the murder of George Floyd, it really seems to have struck a chord around the world. And I'm wondering why you think this particular incident versus all the many that have occurred in the past has resulted in such an outcry internationally. And do you think we've finally reached that tipping point for justice action?
Well, this is clearly a defining moment for us. The very last words of George Floyd during the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of his murder continue to echo and reverberate, which is, I can't breathe. Those words are so striking, I can't breathe. And we've heard this before from the countless Black men and women who have died at the hands of police. Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, just to name a few. And when you look at the realities of Black America, we are grasping for air. It is simply not the justice system that deprives Black America of air. It's the inequities in public education. It's a lack of access to quality health care. It's the large and growing wealth disparities and the underrepresentation of Black America in leadership of corporations and all aspects of government. I believe the collective impact of all of these inequities, plus the fact that so many people are home, so many people are in quarantine, and there's much more of a focus on this one incident and just the cold murder of it, just the callousness of the policemen around him. It demonstrates to the world that our potential is really being stifled. Oddly enough, it's been 57 years since Dr. King I Have a Dream speech. And as you know, the situation with George Floyd and so many African Americans really is leaving Dr. King's speech of having a dream and his dream just unrealized at this point. And the one aspect that I know in my life is that I am my brother's keeper. And our senses of justice and fairness and equality have not been deadened, but really alive and awakened to this moment of change, this moment, this tipping point, as you refer to it. And we believe in the hope of things to come.
Yeah, well, that's really powerful. I am seeing actions, small and big, across the country, and that does hearten me. And I think there's been a lot of self-reflection going on. As you said, people are home and have that time, and I really hope it continues. So you've had quite a journey from the day that you came from Guyana to Brooklyn, Guyana, South America, when you were only 14 years old, all the way to now, of course, being the managing director of a very well-respected Grace Global Capital consulting firm to the financial industry. I'm wondering, what do you primarily credit your success to?
Marla, there's a great African proverb that I love, and it says, Wherever the stream flows, it never forgets its source. And I'd like to honor my great-grandmother, who had 9 biological children, but she and my granddad had room in their hearts to adopt 5 young sisters who had lost their mom. They had limited resources, but just a big heart and lots of love. And as a result of raising 14 children, I am the second grandchild of 52 grandchildren.
Wow.
And as we speak here today, Marla, I can assure you that I was the favorite. My grandmother was so phenomenal. She had very little formal education. She spoke very well in spite of it. And whenever I complimented her, she would say to me that she learned to read and write by reading the King James Version of the Bible. So therefore, she would say words to me such as, Grace, you have blessed my eyesight and you have lengthened my years. But her most treasured words to me were, believe beyond your limits. Believe beyond your limits. And as I look back at my life, I have climbed lots of mountains, literally and figuratively, that have pushed me way beyond my limits. I'm amazed as I walk into boardrooms and advise CEOs, CFOs, board of directors, regulators on transactions in excess of $5 billion. And as you know, I'm a mountain climber, and I've climbed the equivalent of the Empire State Building stacked upon itself 67 times.
Wow.
That's over 100,000 feet in the 25 mountain peaks I've climbed in 3 different continents, and it's been quite a journey. In addition, I have mentored over 80 high school students, and I still have my sanity and I have joy. But it has not always been that way. And I could not imagine my life being as blessed as it has been today. Because when I was at the age 21, and I was between my 3rd and 4th year at Pace University in New York, I came home to my family in Brownstone that we all shared, and I stood outside with my mom and dad and 6 brothers and sisters. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and we watched in the sweltering summer heat on that June day. We watched as flames engulfed our home and ravaged every memory. I mean, every stitch of clothing was destroyed, and anything that any of us would consider near and dear to us was just ravaged by the fire. And what I distinctly remember is that my entire life, at the end of the day, my entire life could fit in a 13-gallon trash bag with room left to spare. Sometimes it's so difficult for us when we have our dreams, we have our hopes, we have our vision. We're working so hard towards it, only to see that it goes up in flame. So we came here for the American dream, but at that moment, it felt like the American nightmare. Yeah. And what you could not imagine, and what I could not imagine, is that the next 7 months, the next 228 days, the next 5,472 hours, that I and my family, we would be living in a homeless shelter in Brooklyn. You know, at that time, I felt so shattered, so devastated, so deflated. But it was at that moment that I remembered my grandmother's words that she had deposited in me about believing beyond your limits, that my life is not based on circumstances, it's based on choices, and that I should never let my circumstances dilute the truth of my potential. You see, my grandmother believed like the great Howard Thurman, the great civil rights leader, who said you should never reduce your dreams to the level of the event which is your immediate experience. So in that shelter, I determined to continue with passion my undergraduate degree. I went into my Pace University and I increased my credits from 12 to 18. I really refocused on my vision and continued, although I was going back and forth from a homeless shelter, I continued my undergraduate degree. I graduated on time. But what's important right now at this moment is that I'm not just an advisor to insurance companies and billions of transactions. What's important is that I'm passionate about financial wellness, passionate about families being insured. I'm passionate about us living our lives to our fullest potential because I know what I've overcome. And I know that it's important for families to stay together, healthy and safe, even in the face of tragedy. So I credit my success for me because I'm standing on the broad shoulders of my grandmother and her strength and her prayers and the long line of family member, my mother who's listening right now, and my late dad and my ancestor who prayed and dreamed for a day like this to come. Because without their love, support, and encouragement, I could not have been here today.
Wow. That is really inspiring. Your grandmother is a very wise woman, and I'm sure she made probably the other 51 grandchildren feel like they were her favorite too. But you also mentioned that you've encountered some prejudice along the way, along your journey, and clearly you found a way to overcome it. So I'm wondering, how did you choose to react to that? And what advice would you give to others that are facing some of those same challenges?
It was never unusual for me to be the only woman and or the only African American in the room. On Wall Street, I was the first woman and the first African American to be promoted in my division. And I think if you're a woman and you're ambitious and you're smart and you're utilizing your talents to the fullest, there's a pioneering element to your journey. It could be very isolating where you don't necessarily always feel that you're part of the club. But I always remembered that my values, and I strongly believe that our values are not based on what the world tells us or what the world perceives of us. Our value is based on the fact that we have gifts, we've got talents within us that can really make us outstanding. What's interesting and ironic, the signals that tell us that we're different because of our gender, our race, our economic background, or whatever it might be, those might be the very unique aspects of you, along with your talents, that could allow you to have a seat at the table or to enter the room and really have your voice being heard. So I always believe is that my talents, my uniqueness, and my unique perspectives are my strengths. And another aspect to me that I find it's interesting, I'd like you to know, is that I have always been motivated by the word now. I've always been motivated by the words I can't or you can't. For me, no means that there are options yet to be considered. If the door is closed, I want to know how I can get over it, under it, through it, around it. Is there a crack in the door? Is there a window or a ceiling? Can I knock harder or can I just kick it down? I think we need to push and keep pushing. That's the kind of steely determination we need in our lives. And I really believe we have to also look for allies. We have to look for and seek out mentors and sponsors that can really give us some advice and some insights. Those who are willing and have a vested interest in seeing us succeed. There are allies out there. It's so important for us to network and keep networking. And we cannot stay silent and hope someone else will speak in our behalf. This is why I would like every young girl and woman listening to the sound of my voice to know that it's your unique gifts, talents, skills, ideas, tools, and resources that you have that the world needs to hear and know. So keep pushing, keep going, network, collaborate with allies, and you will get through into your dreams and get through in life.
You've been living that as well. I know that you've been doing some mentoring as well. So what can employers do to make sure that they're being inclusive and sensitive to the barriers that some of their staff or customers face?
So we are definitely living in the age of innovation, and study after study shows that in order to innovate and to thrive, a group needs to be diverse, inclusive, respectful of others, and empathetic to each other's needs. So leaders need to be intentional about changing the culture of the organization to have it be more inclusive. So just recruiting is not enough, because if employees are there and they don't feel valued, they don't feel it's a culture that's inclusive of them, they will leave. So companies need to take deliberate actions to train, mentor, sponsor, promote employees of color. This action will obviously create a more inclusive environment. But more importantly, I believe employers need to align the company's values and action with diversity. Mm-hmm. So unless there's an alignment and there's a clear, definitive decisions and actions that employees can look and see and be proud of, I don't think we'll be able to push the needle. I am encouraged in this environment, although we're in a crisis, and I know George Floyd's situation is on everyone's mind. I'm encouraged by the companies that are willing to take leadership on this. I'm encouraged by companies who are reflecting, who are saying, are we representing our communities that we serve? Is there more we can do? Since our values include equity, are our actions reflective of that? And I think that's a healthy discussion for companies to have. And I'm just pleased to be a part of some of those discussions with my clients as well.
So another way you've challenged yourself is through mountaineering, and you've scaled some of the world's largest mountains. Congratulations on that. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that get started?
So in 2004, I received an invitation from one of my former professors at Wharton, Dr. Michael Yusin. Dr. Yusin had a vision of putting together trips with various alums of various backgrounds in order to hike and climb a different area of the world and have a bonfire discussion at night on a relevant business issue. He really believed that in order to grow as leaders, you need to get out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So I received this invitation to climb to 20,000 feet in the country of Bhutan, which is located between India and China, for 14 days, 8 days up and 6 days down. Now, as I looked at this invitation, I considered the fact that I had never hiked or climbed before. However, 9/11 was still fresh in my mind, and I had made a conscious decision to seek more meaningful and adventurous vacations. So when I got this invitation, not only was it timely, but after considering it, I felt a calling. I would say almost a calling to accept this invitation. So 6 months later, 28 of us met in the country of Bhutan to start our trip. The first couple of days were exceedingly difficult for me, as you can imagine, but I love the great outdoors. I love the landscape. I love the country. And I also love the fact that I had this amazing opportunity to network with fellow alumni from Wharton. And as the trip went along, I got better and better. But on the 7th day, when we were at 17,500 feet high, wow, one of my fellow mountaineer, Eric Byrne, became very ill. He was medically evacuated, but shockingly, we received word that Eric had passed away.
Oh, so sorry.
It was one of the most devastating times for me, for all of us on that mountain, to be in the middle of nowhere and to receive such tragic news. It was an unimaginable development. So we made our way back to Ground Zero, and we went to mourn with Eric's family. And a number of climbers on that trip decided that they could never climb again. But a few of us got together and we decided to honor Eric's memory and honor the vision that Dr. Yasim had, and we felt the best way to do so was to continue climbing mountains. So the very next year, in 2005, 11 of us, led by Dr. Jerry Maida, decided to continue climbing. We would climb at Kilimanjaro. So we successfully climbed Kilimanjaro. And I cannot begin to tell you the feeling of standing at the highest peak in Africa. At 19,000 feet, looking down at clouds, knowing that you've overcome every obstacle to get there, that you've pushed yourself beyond every single limit, that you've bonded with your fellow mountaineers beyond words. It was an experience I will never forget. So today, our group has climbed over 25 mountain peaks on 3 continents, over 100,000 feet. And the resiliency, trust, and bond of this group is nothing less than amazing. The theme for our discussion is thriving through chaos. In order to climb a mountain, you must learn to adapt and thrive in a chaotic environment. You're climbing while the landscape is constantly changing and evolving, and every step could be the difference between your life and your death. There are so many lessons I've learned on the mountain that I've applied to my work and to my life, and I look forward to sharing more of that with you.
What a beautiful way to honor Eric's memory. And it does sound like there's some parallels perhaps between your mountain climbing and the way that you are able to be successful in your career. So I wonder if you can outline some of those.
I have 3 lessons or 3 distinct parallels I like to make here. When I first started climbing a mountain and I had imagined what the trip would be like, I thought getting from the base of the mountain to the summit would be a series of linear steps from one to the next, gradually leading you from the base to the peak of the mountain. And one of my first parallels is that it is not like that. Climbing a mountain like life is not linear. A mountain climbing path looks more like this.
Yeah.
It never ceases to amaze me when climbing a mountain how many detours, setbacks, storms, accidents, illnesses, deaths while climbing a mountain. Last year, I climbed the highest peak in Europe. It's Mount Elbrus, and it's in the country of Russia, right at the border of the country of Georgia. It's 18,510 feet high. It was not the highest peak I've climbed, but it was by far the most dangerous. On the day of the summit, when my guide and I were at 13,000 feet, a storm came in. We had harnessed ourselves to each other so that we can stay connected and secure. But although it was 10 a.m., it became completely dark, and I could not see further than 4 inches from my face.
Wow.
And I will never forget the sound of the 50-mile-an-hour winds as it came in. It was so loud, it sounded like a New York City train. And then when I thought it could not get any worse, the Siberian wind and cold came in at minus 20 degrees. Oh. It took my guide and I over 12 hours to summit a mountain that we thought we would have finished in 5 hours. And when I arrived at base camp safely, I could have kissed the snow-bound earth. And so it was a journey that was far from linear, filled with so many setbacks, but we kept going and we successfully completed it. And my second major parallel and lesson is never forget the power and the progress of the small step. You see, I've learned that the climate can change suddenly in a manner that's not in your favor. And you seem like you're fighting a losing battle. And the mountain seems so steep at times, and your feet get very, very heavy. that is when I remind myself to just keep going. There's a mindset that a mountaineer has, that determination to keep going. It's like a mantra that the step, just keep going. And, I remember Dr. King's words, and one of my favorite quote of him is when he says, just take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the entire stairway. Just take the first step and then the next and then the next, and just keep moving. The worst thing you can do in the mountain that will guarantee that you will surely die, particularly in a storm, is when you stop and you're paralyzed with fear and you don't move. Inaction will cause your death. And when you stop, your body freezes, your muscles get stiff and they get paralyzed, you get colder, and it's harder to start again. But the mindset of keep going no matter what. Keep going, doesn't matter how difficult it is. Now, there are times when your health is in danger and you must turn back. But short of that, you have to have that determination to just keep going. Doesn't matter what comes in my way, keep going in order to be successful. And then the third and most important is the power of the pivot. Why pivot? Because you can have the best strategies in place, but your environment is constantly changing and you constantly need to recalibrate, to reset, to retool, and constantly have the agility to change your strategy and change your steps based on the current conditions. So regardless of what you're going through, and I understand we're in a pandemic, there's lots of social and economic unrest. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty that we're living in. The stress level is very great. But just remember the mountaineer mindset. 1, life is not linear. 2, remember the value of the small step. And 3, always remember that it's okay to pivot. There is power in pivoting. And it allows you to reset your course and to keep going.
Yeah, those are perfect lessons for what we're living through. I know there's certainly a lot of people and businesses that are pivoting right now because they have to out of necessity. But I can't even imagine being on a mountain and not being able to see the 4 inches in front of your face. So congratulations for getting through that. But before you leave, I have to ask you a little bit about insurance. As an insurance investment banking expert yourself, what impacts do you see for the COVID-19 on the insurance sector?
So we are living in a world of emerging risk. So COVID-19 is changing the landscape of healthcare in this country and worldwide. And we're seeing much more in terms of telemedicine. And what we will see is that technology incorporated into healthcare and into insurance will actually change the way we interact with the insurance companies. What do I mean by that? So having wearables that monitor whether it's via blood pressure and heart rate will give not only healthcare professionals, but will give the insurance companies real-time information on our health. And they can adjust our premiums there as well. You may notice that some of the automobile companies have returned premiums to the insured because people weren't driving anymore. So insurance companies are having real-time information on us that they can adjust and tailor their policies on a continuum basis. So it's not just a year contract that's being evaluated and after the fact. It's about having real-time data that the insurance companies can use, and some of it will have predictive qualities on how we will behave, how we will work, and our lifestyle that insurance companies can adjust. And due to all of these technologies, cyber risk is becoming increasingly important to us. And there's going to be a lot of insurance around the protection of that technology for all of us as we become more and more insured.
Yeah, a big area of growth, I'm sure. So We're at that part of the podcast where I ask the same question of all guests. Certainly some companies have done it right and have gotten inclusion right. And I'm wondering, can you tell us about a company that you feel has really made you feel kind of more like family than a customer?
This is a time when companies have a real opportunity of showing leadership in terms of equity, fairness, and justice. Yeah. And one company whose statement I greatly admire is Ben & Jerry's, who came out with a very unequivocal statement about the inequities and their values of justice and fairness in the workplace and for all of their customers. So I think that's a great area that companies have a chance to show leadership. And I applaud Ben & Jerry for doing so.
Yeah, great. Shout out to Ben & Jerry's.
Before we end, I would just like to add a few things. So As you know, I have a passion for financial wellness, particularly because at the event of my fire when I was 21, and really made me realize the value of insurance and the value of having a financial cushion. So as a result, I have written a book, which is 6 steps to uplift your financial wellness from homeless to millionaire. It's a book that I've dedicated to my grandmother, and I put simple steps that everyone can follow to really enhance their financial position. I think times like these means that we have to pay more attention to our financial well-being. And when you look at history, when you look at many families, many of us are suffering from financial PTSD. And I wanted to leave a legacy doing more for my community and the communities at large to really help everyone that have questions about financial wellness and how do they start investing. And what I find with your iPhone or any cell phone and the various apps around financial wellness is in the palm of your hands. And I wanted to make this book simple and easy to follow with a step-by-step approach. And I wanted to mention that to our audience.
I really appreciate that. Your passion for helping others with their financial wellness is very obvious, anyone that meets you. So that's great that you've written the book, and I'm sure it will help many people. So we're wrapping up our session today with Grace Vandecruz. Thank you so much for joining us on Banking on Experience. And this is Marla Fields, your host from CRM Next.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Banking on Experience. Remember to tune in each week and subscribe, where we aim to simplify work, drive growth, and deliver on experience.